Deep state. When did it all begin and where? To go and understand this, we need to go back in time, almost to the 1930s. Well, there's just one businessman come lawyer come everything else, Wild Bill Donovan. And he was a Republican. And one of his rivals at that time, politically, was, of course, Franklin Roosevelt, who, before he became the President of the United States, was the governor of the state of New York. And Wild Bill Donovan was a Republican and Roosevelt was a Democrat, and they would frequently have clashes ideologically, of course. But between all these things, a friendship sort of formed, because on many things, Roosevelt found that Donovan had ideas similar to his, but he was across the aisle. But somehow the friendship formed, and Donovan started traveling abroad, especially between the period of First World War to the Second World War, looking at the world, talking to some of the leaders, emerging leaders of the world, such as Mussolini, and also people in Great Britain. Remember, Great Britain was the empire at that point of time, and he started establishing friendships. And it is believed that as things progressed, Second World War broke out. Initially, United States was neutral, but then it was eventually dragged into the war on December 6, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. But before that, by that time, Bill Donovan had already started, planting a thought in the minds of Roosevelt that there has to be some sort of a secret service kind of organization that United States needed to have. And for that, he had help from some people in the British intelligence, which was the MI6. These people helped him formulate his thoughts for what kind of a structure that should be. And somewhere around that time, I don't know the exact time, October 1941, some say, that a new organization was formed, Office of Strategic Services, OSS. This had so much power between 1941 up to the Second World War, end of Second World War, that when the war ended and Truman assumed office, he realized that OSS had so much power concentrated in the hands of so few. This was headed by, of course, Wild Bill Donovan, and he seemed to know everybody's kundali in his hands. And Truman, who succeeded Roosevelt died in office. Truman succeeded him, and he was there when the war ended and the United States won. Of course, United Nations was formed and all that stuff. That is happening in a separate track. Truman in 1945 decided that the OSS had to be disbanded because it was having too much power in the hands of too few. So OSS was disbanded. There was an order that Truman signed, and it was disbanded. But the people who formed OSS, these people used to live in an area called Georgetown, which is very close to Washington, D.C., the place of power. And even today, that place is considered like the heartbeat of intelligence, and that's the place that essentially runs the world. So now in 1945, Second World War is over. There are winners, there are losers, and then reconstruction of Germany begins. But even as all this was happening, there was a new war starting. What was that? The Cold War. The Cold War was starting between the United States and Russia. Now, one of the spoils of war was the brilliant, talented German scientists who were all the experts in nuclear program. And because the United States exploded the Hiroshima-Nagasaki atom bomb, Russia wanted to get its hands on it. And at that time, they didn't have it. So people went back to the place from where all these things were supposedly have originated. Remember, Oppenheimer was German, and then he migrated to United States. So was Einstein. Many people, many German scientists of the highest caliber, they actually somehow escaped to United States, and most of them also happen to be Jews. And you get the idea. I'm not going to bring the Jewish angle here, but they escaped from the prosecution of Hitler and the Nazis. Now, so you had the established base of the leading scientists of the era in the United States, and Russia wanted to get its hands on the atomic power technology. Then what happened? There were people who turned out to be spies, and then they essentially took some things from it is believed, to Russia. Plus, Russia also had its portion of Germany, which is what was called as the East Germany, and they started getting some scientists from there. So frequently when you used to have these fights about whose technology was better, it would usually be the Americans saying our Germans are better than your Germans. You get the idea, right? So things were leading up to an escalation. Now America recognized that Russia was somebody that could not be ignored, and plus USSR, whatever area they freed in the Second World War, they kept that, and that became the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So Russia was expanding, and it was doing very brutal way. Poland, Hungary, all these countries were captured, and USSR was raging. I'm talking about late 45 and so on and so forth. Now what happened was, between that time and 1947, this race to acquire arms to be the most powerful country on the earth became a big deal, and US found itself looking at Russia, and both countries were really spying on each other. What are you doing? What am I doing? Essentially it had to start with the atomic technology that got into Soviet Russia. I'm not saying that it was all from the United States. Some parts may have come from what was remaining in the Germany, the scientists that were of German origin who became East Germany, which also became a satellite of the Russian USSR. Now 1945, OSS was disbanded. But the people are still hanging around. People are still having huge houses in Georgetown. They had that power. They had tasted power. And they were essentially saying, how do I get that power back? So what happened was, between 45 and 47, a lot of things started happening, which essentially meant that Truman, still the president, had to come back and somehow reignite the office, something similar to what the OSS was. And on September 8th, 1947, under the National Security Act of 1947, the Central Intelligence Agency was formed. So OSS, 1945 closed and then reopened in 1947. Much of the people who were there in OSS came over to CIA, and from that point forward, CIA never looked back. 1952 was one of the first things that they did. They dismantled the democratically elected government of Iran, and you are seeing that even today, that has not stopped. So somehow, that is where CIA got this notoriety of regime change operators and things of that nature. So you can see that it started in mid-30s when America started realizing that they needed something of the nature of MI6 of British, because the British could not have ruled the world without having a very advanced intelligence network. Because there were always very few British citizens who were running vast swaths of land. Africa, for example, India, Ceylon, Australia, New Zealand, everything. So from there, that has become OSS, and now what you are seeing in its current form is the CIA. And CIA is perhaps the core or the nucleus of the deep state, but many people keep coming and going depending on their dwindling fortunes as businessmen, as power brokers, and what have you. So what you have now is a nucleus which is believed to be the CIA. Again, I'm not 100% sure that in today's form the deep state is the CIA, but there is enough track record to point that much of the underpinnings of what is playing in the deep state, or termed as deep state, perhaps has its origins in this agency. So this is where we are today. I'll be continuing on this one in a few days or few weeks, when I will come back and revisit this and give you more clarity on who could be the key operators in deep state. Because what you are seeing playing out today in these 60 days of regime change time in the United States, where Biden administration is acting with gay abandon, this is not something that has been seen in the United States in the past. The loser starts, gentlemanly giving over all the information to the transition team. The transition team has to absorb all these things, find out where things are, what things are bookmarked, what are the holes, what are the potholes, what are the bumps, all that stuff. And instead, what we are seeing is unbridled power to go and act and on their own, as far as, like, for example, the Russia war is concerned. So this is something that's new, and let's wait and see how this thing plays out. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.